All right, Stochastic, here we go. It's your old pal EMac, joined by Neil Orfield as we get ready to do the first Saturday NBA Live Before Lock of the season. Neil, I did a morning show for basketball. I've been writing articles. It feels like we're full on in the swing. We already have players resting. How great is that?
Yeah, I mean, General Soreness coming back. He's out again. Greg would kick his ass. So we all agree that Greg would just kick Jimmy Butler's ass because he can't even play a basketball game without wearing himself out. Yeah, as a Timberwolves fan, it's like a little bit like, come on, man, quit ducking us. Like, come play in Minnesota, but also makes it a little bit easier for the Wolves.
When was the last time he played against the Timberwolves? He has at some point, right? Or does he?
Oh, he has.
Okay.
That was what when Kat chirped at him. Say hi to Rachel for me or something like that. Rachel Nicholas, of course. Remember that whole
Yeah.
yeah, he's played a few games, but he's also ducked us several times.
Rajon Rondo was the worst at that. He just whoever he had and he had a litany of teams he had played for over the years towards the end. He just somehow magically never seemed to go against them. But it's neither here nor there. We have 7 games. We have 58 minutes. We're gonna kind of jump on in. We'll talk a little Bet 365. We'll talk a little lineup generator. We're gonna talk about the Stochastic Avatar promotion. But let's get into some games here first. From a high level, let's look at the injuries just so we can set the stage. For New Orleans and the Knicks, everybody's relatively fine. Zach LaVine was he still says questionable, but I've seen other sources say he's probable to play tonight. We have 7 teams on a back-to-back and quite a few in 3 and 4 games. We'll talk about those as we go game by game here. Since we are the only show today, we're going to use that format. For Memphis, they're going to be without Luke Kennard, who's in the concussion protocol still, and Sandy Aldama is out. Johnny Davis is probably a wasted pick for the Wizards, but he's not available. And then Landry Shamet also for the Wizards, broken toe. He's going to be out for at least another week. Important players who are out: Jared Allen still out with his bruised ankle. Darius Garland is out for a second game with a hamstring injury, and now Donovan Mitchell played 42 minutes last night or something along those lines. Laid down a monster after barely producing in the first 6 minutes of the first quarter. Ended up with 70 fantasy points on both sides. He's dealing with a tender hammy himself. Coach says, well, we're not sure. We'll see how it goes. So, yay, we are in full swing here, Neil. We also have Tyrese Halliburton. I know he was ill, and I know he missed yesterday's practice. I don't know if he played in shoot around today, so we'll be looking for that news to pop up shortly. James Harden is tomorrow's problem because the Toronto is hosting the 76ers. Tomorrow, the 76ers are back in Philly. They're going to be playing Portland, so that'll be tomorrow's fun. OG Anunoby dealt with some cramping at the end of last game. He is available to play tonight. Jimmy Butler is resting. Kevin Love is resting. Caleb Martin is out with an knee issue. Kyle Lowry is available to play. I suspect he'll be in the starting lineup. If he's not in the starting lineup, don't play him because God only knows what they're going to do with that. And then that takes us on into Phoenix. No Bradley Beal, no Devin Booker. We're in full swing. Didn't even make it a full week, and we already have an exciting injury report with a lot of decisions, Neil. I'm handing this one over to you. New York at New Orleans. The important things to remember for this one is the Knicks played last night in Atlanta. They won 126 to 120. This is back-to-back and 3 and 4 for them. Mitchell Robinson played 38 minutes. Randall and Barrett played 34 minutes each, and Brunson played 33. So not a ton of minutes. Surprisingly, Robinson played 38. I didn't think his fouls would allow him to do that. What do you got for our first game?
Yeah, for the Knicks, I mean, nobody getting a ton of ownership. Our highest owned player for the Knicks, Jalen Brunson, at 6.7%. So, and that seems about right, honestly, looking at the Knicks. Like, we don't have anybody who projects as an extremely great value. Mitchell Robinson, our best value for the Knicks, at 5.2x. We have him for around 28 and a half minutes, around like just under 26 fantasy points at 5,000. He looks pretty good. Mitchell Robinson, certainly a decent value, but of course, you can only play 2 centers on DraftKings. So, you would be using one of those spots on Mitchell Robinson. Certainly a guy who's always live to go off, put up a big game, a double-double, but not standing out as like some fantastic play on this slate. Similarly for New Orleans, for me, nobody's standing out as like an objectively incredible play here. We've got some fine values. We've got Brandon Ingram. He's 8,000. We've got him projected for about 5x, 40 fantasy points. Valanciunas, 5,800. We actually have for 5.1 value. A little over 29 fantasy point projection for Valanciunas, but nobody really standing out to me for New Orleans. This is kind of one of the more boring games on the slate at first look to me. Nothing really stands out as like great values. People project fine point per dollar. Certainly, you can always spike an upside with a lot of these players on the team, but pretty healthy. Pelicans team, pretty healthy. Knicks team. Nobody really standing out to me as somebody I really want to play, jam into my lineups. Maybe I'll get to the field on some of these guys. Probably for Mitchell Robinson, 5%. Maybe I'll have him in 1 in 20 lineups, but no great plays for me here. Anybody that you love in this game?
No. If anybody slides into the lineup, I'm okay with that. Chat, we are working to get my sound a little more
You're much
balanced.
quieter now, by the way.
Apologies for that. This is producer Jacob working the magic behind the scenes here. So and then I'm just want to knock the microphone on the side, maybe shake it a little bit, and then see if it works. Otherwise, I don't do too much here for this. No, this game it's reasonable. We've got a couple games that are reasonable. We're going to get some of the players in. They're perfectly fine options. When we look at DraftKings and FanDuel, you kind of start to look on the size of today's slate. Somebody in around the 5.2 points per thousand. That's where the optimizers kind of cut off. If you aren't setting player caps or making other adjustments there, a lot of players in this game are kind of right around there. They're between the 4.6 or a little bit higher. So if you don't want to miss out on Zion or Randall or Brunson, you're going to need to make sure that you do a little something extra to get them into your lineups. Otherwise, if you're running an unencumbered crunch, they're not going to pop up. But that's just because they're not screaming values. We do have some other values that we will get to. Anything else from this game?
No, honestly, I think so. Of the playable players in this game, I would say you can play Zion Williamson. Like, he's not a great value, but certainly you can always like hope for him to spike an upside at 1% ownership. I think that's fine. Brandon Ingram playable, CJ McCollum, Jonas Valanciunas, Herbert Jones, 4.9x value. We've got him projected for 35 minutes and 24.5 fantasy points at 5,000. Seems fine. Like, he's playing enough minutes that the upside is there at least. I think those are the only playable players for me from the Pels. From the Knicks, you can always play Randall, Brunson, Barrett, Robinson. I don't think I'm going anywhere else on the Knicks.
All right. And see, Chad, this is what happens when you let your old pal live out in the wild for months at a time. I haven't had a producer on one of my shows in I don't know how long. So that, coupled with me having to update the operating system on my software, resetting everything to factory settings, I'm sure is causing a little problems, but we should be hopefully getting a little better here now. Apologies for that. If we missed anything on this or you couldn't hear it, we'll happily loop back onto this one. See, I should have let off with some reads and then everybody wouldn't be complaining right now, but that's okay. That's okay. Let's run into one more game here, Neil. We've got the Chicago Bulls at Detroit. Chicago favored by a bucket, 218 implied point total here. Again, Zach LaVine appears to be probable tonight. We should know the starting lineups here in about 20 minutes, but this is a back-to-back for Chicago. It's a 3-4 as well. Last night, they beat Toronto in overtime in Chicago. Tonight, or that was 104-103. DeMar DeRozan played 41 minutes. Vucevic and White played 40 each. Zach played 38, and then Caruso played 32 off the bench. Detroit also on a back-to-back in a 3-4. They won in Charlotte 111-99. You had Isaiah Stewart get 36 minutes and Jalen Duren get 35. Duren looks like one of the better plays on the slate today from a point per dollar option. He is turning into, or not, he already is a phenomenal rebounder. Sort of reminds me a little bit of say an Andre Drummond type, if you will. What do you have in this battle of the Midwest?
Yeah, I mean, Duren stands out as a great value. I know our guy Eric Lindquist has been all over the Jalen Duren train, and he's been doing it. He's been doing it so far this year. Duren has been crushing it. We've got him in for about 34 minutes, 33 fantasy points at 5,900. He does stand out as a great value. The only knock really on Duren is that he's only center eligible, and you can only play up to 2 centers. But we're still gonna be playing some Duren. We've got him projected for around 15% ownership. That seems reasonable to me. I like Duren just fine. Cade Cunningham, you can certainly play. He doesn't project as a great value. 8,739 fantasy points, not like a fantastic value, but certainly can spike an upside. We've got Isaiah Stewart in there, 5.7% projected ownership, 33 minutes, 27 fantasy points at 5,200. Looks like a nice value. Actually, a lot of nice values here on Detroit. We have Alec Burks in there for 23 fantasy points in 24 minutes at 4,400 price tag. Kind of nice value. A lot of playable players on Detroit. But Duran does look the best of the group in terms of just the value that he provides. Isaiah Stewart, Beef Stew in there as well. He's 5,200. We're projecting him for 27 fantasy points. So he looks playable as well. A lot of decent options here for Detroit. Chicago is interesting. I'm kind of anticipating that Zach LaVine isn't going to play in this game. He was the latest that he's a game time decision. I feel like the news has gotten worse, so I'm kind of anticipating that he's not going to play, but we're going to know that before lock. This is a game that starts right at lock, so we don't really need to speculate. We'll know at some point during this hour whether Zach LaVine is going to play, but if LaVine is out, like it's going to be a smash spot for DeRozan and Vooch. I kind of like the spot for Vooch either way. 7,400 Vucevic. He has said that he likes playing against smaller centers. He has absolutely eaten beef stew in the past. Now we have Jalen Duren to contest with as well. So maybe not quite the smash spot that it was when he was just facing beef stew out there, but still, Duren's only 6'10". Vooch says that he likes playing against smaller centers. I think his history has shown that he can absolutely smash against smaller centers. So this is a spot. 7,400 Vucevic, 8% projected ownership. I'm going to be above that number. I like Vooch quite a bit. He doesn't project extremely well. 37 fantasy points, as I said, 7,400. So he's a 5x kind of value. Looks just fine from that perspective. But he has at times in the past just eaten smaller centers, and with Duren, it's Duren's a little bit bigger, 6'10", 250 pounds, a little bit bigger than you're dealing with Isaiah Stewart, but still not like a really imposing center. And we have the possibility of LaVine either being out or could still be limited even if he's playing. So I do like some Vooch. I'm going to like DeRozan a lot better if LaVine is out. He's playable either way. He's DeMar DeRozan. He can spike an upside. He's only 7,500. We're projecting for around 37 fantasy points at 7,500. Looks fine. About 10% ownership. If LaVine himself plays, then that's going to be interesting. 7,300, like that's a pretty nice price tag on LaVine. Just a matter of like, are you expecting him to be himself fully here? I'm not really sure. I'll probably play around the field. We've got him projected for around 4% ownership. Kobe White looks really good from a value perspective. He's only 4,800. We're projecting him for 31.5 minutes, 28 fantasy points. That looks really good for Kobe White. I don't think I'm going the Drummond route. I don't think I'm playing anybody else from the Bulls. How about you?
So it absolutely if Zach is out. Otherwise, Vooch looks like a decent center. We have a lot of options there. I think Caruso is okay. And Kobe White is okay as well. That'll firm up in a little bit. We're starting to get the news coming out. Tyrese Halliburton is expected to play tonight. He was dealing with a non-COVID related illness. Well, I haven't said that phrase in a while, but he sounds like he's good to go there. The other one someone asked about was Derrick Rose. So he is in Memphis now. So we'll talk about that when we get there. I thought it was somehow I had flashbacks to Chicago / the Knicks. And then I was like, no, he's not with those teams, is he? So then I had to go look him up. We'll get to that when we get to that game. But that was wow, he's been around in the league for quite some time here. Is there anything else you would like to bring up for this game?
No, I think we've largely covered it. My biggest stand from this game is I'm going to be over the field on Vooch. I think that it is a spot where he can really dominate against this Detroit team.
All righty. So we have the Stochastic Avatar promotion. I'm going to drop the link into chat so you guys can see all the details. But we've got if you go to Stochastic Avatar, stochastic.com/avatar, download the Stochastic Avatar, upload that to your DFS site of choice, place top 3, first, second, or third, no chops, first, second, or third in any contest with at least 5,000 people, and you can win 30 days of Stochastic Premium. What you got to do is take a screenshot with that stochastic avatar visible, send that on Twitter to Stochastic HOF. You'll be featured in the Stochastic Hall of Fame, and you will also get 30 days of Stochastic Premium. If you meet those parameters, you can win one of those per calendar year. And we like to celebrate all wins, large or small. So even if you have a win that was good for you, didn't meet those parameters, send that on in too. We like to put that out there. Lofty will give you a shout out and induct you into the Stochastic Hall of Fame. All right, not to fear, guys. They're still tweaking the mics a little bit here, but it can be tricky doing this live. We'll be good. We'll be good. Deep breaths. It's okay. It's okay. It's Saturday. We have tomorrow of NFL, and then we have work on Monday, but that's still 36 hours away. So we're going to kick back and relax a little bit. Neil, moving on to our next game here on the docket. Oh, it is these Memphis Grizzlies here. So obviously Ja Morant is out. Luke Kennard out with a concussion, and Sandy Aldama not expected to play with a sore ankle. We have the new look Washington Wizards on the other side. You got Kyle Kuzma, got the bag. You have Jordan Poole, who gets to shoot as much as he wants now. Expect north of 20 field goal attempts per game. Tyus Jones finally does have his own team to run as the starting point guard. You've got Denny Avdia lurking there. You've got DeLon Wright in the mix. Can make for some interesting closing lineups. We'll have to see how all that shakes out. But Jaren Jackson Jr. does look like a strong play on both sides, particularly with his power forward eligibility. Talk to us a little bit about Memphis. I'm going to see what we have, if we have Derrick Rose projected here.
So first of all, we got Zach Levine says he is planning to play tonight. We just got that news. So I was thinking he was more likely to sit, but sounds like he is planning on playing. We'll see if we get any more update from there, but sounds like he's going to be starting, so we can, factor that in. I still like Vooch. Still think, DeRozan, Levine himself, those players are playable, but we don't get the boost of Levine being out there. That is, by the way, Apple Valley High School's own Tyus Jones in there as a starting point guard, taking the team for himself in Washington. Excited to see Tyus Jones getting the opportunity for the Wizards. And he looks good. We've got Tyus Jones projected for 33 fantasy points at around at a $6,000 price tag, around 33 fantasy points. This game is one of the better spots for finding some value. Like, a lot of our best point per dollar plays are in this game. Among them, as I said, Tyus Jones projects for over 33 fantasy points at 6,000. Kyle Kuzma projects for nearly 40 fantasy points at 7,000. He looks great. One of the better values on the slate. We have Denny Avdia projects for over 30 fantasy points at 5,300. He looks like a solid value. Daniel Gafford projects for 27 fantasy points at 5,100. So a lot of really nice value options on the Wizards. And then you can also play Jordan Poole. We have projected for 37 fantasy points at 8,100. He's kind of a pay up to be contrarian, because Poole projected for just 1% ownership. But in a large field GPP, I think, Poole's a guy who could get hot. Like, he can just have high usage here, and he's only 1% owned. So he's still, I think, playable in a large field GPP. DeLone Wright, we're projecting for over 22 fantasy points at 4,700, only 0.5% owned. So that's kind of all of the playable Wizards in my mind. And then on the Grizz, we have some of our better values as well. As you said, missing Luke Kennard, I think, is the only one who is newly missing, but already missing Steven Adams, Brandon Clark, Ja Morant. I don't know if with Santi Aldama has been out as well. So yeah, Luke Kennard really the only new Memphis player is out, but like, Xavier Tillman has already been, like, he's just too cheap. Like, there's no reason for Xavier Tillman to be 5,300 right now. We're projecting him for 32.3 minutes, and he's been getting that. Like, he's just been out there a ton. The past two games, he's played 34 minutes each. He's put up 48 and 34 fantasy points in that game. Nice matchup with the fast-paced Wiz, like the Wizard second fastest pace in the entire league. So no, I don't think Luke Kennard necessarily is the reason for it. Xavier Tillman, he's out there enough. He should be more expensive than he is. He is getting 41% ownership. So factor that in. Like, he is, he looks great from a point per dollar perspective. He's also getting 41% ownership as a result. But I think he is actually our best point per dollar play on the slate, just from a projection standpoint. We've also got Marcus Smart is one of a pretty nice value play here. 5,900. Projects for 34 fantasy points in 32 minutes. As I said, it's a great matchup here for the Grizzlies. They're all fairly inexpensive. As you said, Jaren Jackson Jr. looks really nice from a point per dollar perspective. Only 7,800, projects for 56 fantasy points. Desmond Baines, 8,500, projects for 44 fantasy points. Zaire Williams, one of our better value plays, doesn't project extremely well, 23.7 fantasy point projection, but at 3,900, he looks pretty good. John Conchar, similarly, projecting for just under 23 fantasy points at 4,200, looks okay, looks playable to me. And Derrick Rose, yeah, we're waiting on news. Did you find anything on Derrick Rose?
So we do have him projected to play. He has played in both games. This is important to note. It is a back-to-back. He is 35. He turned 35 at the beginning of this month. I want to say he played 16 minutes in the first game and 22 in the second game. Yep, I've got his game log up here. So I was trying to find, and it's so funny because at this point in the season you're trying to look and say, oh well, I know how to do this query and get back-to-back games, etc., and you're like, but there hasn't been any back-to-backs yet. So I was just trying to see how often he played on back-to-backs last year. He's not on the injury report or anything, so I would suspect kind of his go forward role these days is going to be somewhere between 18 and 20 minutes, and he should be available most games. And now we could see him at parts in the season when, you know, if he gets a soreness or tweaked or something or whatever, he may not play, but I would assume he's going to be in there for the 18 to 22 minutes tonight, probably shading a little bit lower to the 18, but he's 3,300 on DraftKings, so I understand the appeal. The question then becomes, do we need to go there, and what is his actual upside? In the first game, he scored 15 fantasy points. In the second game, he scored 26 fantasy points. So probably low 20s would be about your 60th to 70th percent outcome here. And that means the 30 fantasy points, that's probably a 95th percentile outcome. I don't think he'll get there. But hey, no stone unturned. And I had not realized he was with the Grizz. So there we are.
Yeah, and he's cheap enough that you don't necessarily need, like, you want the 30 fantasy point upside, but like don't necessarily need it for him to pay off his price tag.
All righty. So Charles, I will promise you I will get to your question as soon as we get to Cleveland there. Alex Kistler has a question. He says, how many Grizzlies are too many in a single entry lineup? I would probably, well, you're not going to go more than 4. I would think 3 would be about right. But if you're thinking Tillman looks pretty good, everybody's going to have him. Similarly, it's going to be with Jaren Jackson Jr. And then the question becomes, is your third the next most popular Memphis player? And then you are going to be very similar to the other Memphis stacks. You may want to go for a fourth one or tweak things around. Let me call up our DK ownership here. What do you have for that question there, Neil?
Yeah, so I'm setting my max for all teams at 3. I'm not playing more than 3 players from any team on this slate. That's generally that's my go-to rule. I make exceptions here or there, but it's pretty rare to see more than 3 fantasy players, 3 players from one team in a winning lineup on a larger slate. So for me, I don't see any like teams that have just so much value that we need 4 or 5 from a team. I'm just going to set a hard cap at 3, and that's going to be for all teams.
All right. So I do have our DK ownership up here. So 45% for Tillman, 31 for Jackson. Then Smart, Rose, and Bain are between 12 and 20%. So you will have ample opportunity to tweak your lineup, and you'll have 5, potentially 6 other spots that you can be different from the other Memphis Grizzlies stacks. So the ownership isn't quite as concentrated there. So the popularity is a little more diffused tonight. Turning to, well, we didn't really talk about. You didn't mention Bain, did you?
I mentioned Bain. I didn't.
Okay.
Go in
That's
depth.
a tough price point, but no Ja Morant. He is an excellent scorer. Of course, that means he's scoring dependent. So like in the last game when he was 4 for 17, that was no bueno. He had about 25 fantasy points. In the opener, he was 11 of 22, dropped 5 3-pointers. He had 50 fantasy points. There's the dichotomy there. But I think he's a reasonable upside play. One of the players that does have access to 50 fantasy points tonight.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, take us over to we kind of hit around on the Washington players. On DK, the top 4 look like, from a point per dollar perspective, are Abdia, Kuzma, Tyus Jones, and Daniel Gafford. You're going to have to do a little manipulation to get Jordan Poole into the mix. I have no issue with that because he does have the best chance at getting to 50 fantasy points. But he's going to be a little bit volatile. Kuzma has the best floor of all of them, and at $7,000, Kuzma is a borderline core play there on DK. Let me upload FanDuel here and see what we've got. But how do you want to approach the Washington Wizards?
I already did. I already kind of did the
sorry.
Washington Wizards. But I agree with your analysis. Like Kuzma looks great from a point per dollar perspective, around 40 fantasy points at 7,000. Looks really strong. Jordan Poole doesn't pop as like he's not a great point per dollar play, but I agree with you. Like he is right there with Kuzma as far as likelihood of hitting 50, maybe even, as you said, a little bit higher than Kuzma. So Poole is kind of a pay up to be contrarian 1% owned play that I think makes some sense.
All right. Now we can get to Charles' question. Charles is a regular in chat, so I did not want to miss this, but he is asking Kevin Durant or Donovan Mitchell. So we have the Pacers in Cleveland. This is a back-to-back for Cleveland, as well as being a 3-4. They lost at home last night, 108-105 to the Thunder. Mitchell played 42 minutes. He is a hamstring concern. You've got Mobley, who played about 34 minutes, and LeVert, who played 31 minutes. We are going to be without Darius Garland for tonight, as well as Jarrett Allen. I would probably pick Kevin Durant over Mitchell. That is kind of the question we have here. If you know Mitchell is starting, how concerned are you with him getting into that 40-minute range again?
Fairly. I mean, nursing an injury and already just played big minutes last night. I'm trying to. What did you say the minutes were last night? Let me.
42 for Mitchell.
42 minutes last night. A little bit banged up with a hamstring injury coming out of it. Like I'm a little bit nervous about the playing time getting up to that level. He is playing the Pacers, who were playing. They have been playing at the highest pace actually tied with the Wizards. Those two are tied at the highest pace in the league. So kind of nice from that perspective. I think I'm with you on Durant, but yeah, I mean, we have Mitchell at 34%. I was going to say if you can get a contrarian Mitchell, maybe I changed my mind, but at 34% ownership, close enough. Like that's high enough ownership that I think I just go to Durant also.
All right. So let's move back and we'll start with the Pacers here. Miles Turner looks like another good center option here. I actually like him better than Joel Embiid. We'll talk about Embiid here shortly. Tyrese Halliburton should be a full go. I now would move him ahead of Donovan Mitchell in the pecking order here. I would still have Durant above both of them, but that's going to be the common thought here. What are you thinking here about the Pacers? Tweaked a few things. They now have Bruce Brown, who has the ability to play three, I guess, positions on offense, guard all five, depending if the other team's going to go small ball five. He's kind of the jack of all trades. That is going to interrupt some of the substitution patterns and rotations that we were used to seeing from the Pacers. What are your thoughts for yet another battle of the Midwest, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough spot. Like Cleveland is a pretty solid defense. I guess they are missing Jarrett Allen, so that does help a bit in terms of the matchup for the Pacers. I don't know. Nobody really stands out to me as like a fantastic value. I agree with you. Miles Turner certainly looks playable, but not somebody that I'm going to be like jamming into lineups, particularly because he's only center eligible. I already told you that I really like Vucevic tonight. We've got Xavier Tillman in there. So a lot of centers that I like enough that I'm probably not going to be getting to a ton of Miles Turner, but only 6% ownership. He's certainly a guy who can spike an upside. So I get liking Turner. Tyrese Halliburton, I don't know that I don't think I'm moving him above Donovan Mitchell. Like we have Donovan Mitchell projected for 55 fantasy points. So if he can go, if he is healthy, I think I'm still gonna prefer Mitchell over Halliburton, but they're completely different plays because Halliburton projected for 3% ownership. So like much more contrarian play than Mitchell, who we have projected for a lot of ownership here. Mathurin looks okay, projected for around 27.5 fantasy points at 5,500. Bruce Brown looks okay, projected for 27 fantasy points at 5,300. Buddy Hield is playable, I would say, at 6,000, just a guy who can get hot. Projected for virtually zero ownership and 26.5 fantasy points. So not like a great play, but somebody who, again, has kind of some upside. Obi Toppin, the price has come up so that he's no longer like a great value here, but projected for around 24 fantasy points at 4,800, still in play. I'd say those are the Pacers that I have really that might make it into some of my lineups. Not even necessarily going to though.
All right. Sticking, obviously, we're going to talk about Cleveland here a little bit more. So, somebody in chat was asking, will we have Donovan Mitchell news before 7:00, the Eastern lock time? My guess is right around lock would probably be when we hear it. That could meet, and we saw this. I think it was last night with wasn't it Brooklyn's lineup came out. This other team is 3 7:00 games, 2 7:30 games. The loose guideline for injury reporting is 30 minutes before tip off. We say loose because they try their best, but if someone really is a game time decision, which it sounds like Donovan Mitchell is, we may not know that until much closer to tip off. 15 minutes away, 20 minutes away. That's going to be after lock. So you need to decide if you're going with Donovan Mitchell and we don't have that news, is the replacement that you want in the 7:00 games, then you probably be better off starting with that. If it's going to be someone in the later games, and we have ample later games, and we will know before his tip-off, we should anyway, his status, you can make the adjustments there. So the real question is, what do you do with the 3 games that are locking at 7? I would probably, if you feel strongly about Donovan Mitchell, which I think is totally fine, I would do sort it out with the later games, because we'll still have 4 games, or 8 teams in the player pool, 4 games to choose from. So you have plenty of outs at that point. Cleveland. So some people were fired up in chat the other day. Evan Mobley not smashing enough without Jarrett Allen. His role doesn't change a lot, or his minutes don't change a lot anyway when Allen is out, but he doesn't have to battle him for rebounds. He gets a few more touches in the paint. His efficiency goes up, but it doesn't necessarily mean more minutes. It can, right? And he's certainly going to be the closing 5 for the most part, but it's not like, oh, they're going to have to play him 38 or 40 minutes. They have other capable options to rotate through, but I still think Evan Mobley is a good play today.
Yeah, Evan Mobley, certainly a very strong point per dollar play here. And yeah, it's not really that he's playing any more minutes, but it is like his role does change in that he's just playing more center, not having to compete for those rebounds quite as much. At 7,300, he looks great. He looks like one of the better values on the slate. He did let us down two games ago, and he was the absolute smash chalk play. He was played 34 minutes at 6,300 as the starting center and only put up 23 fantasy points. So that was, I understand the disappointment there, but then came back against OKC, put up 42 fantasy points in 34 minutes as well. A little bit more like what you're expecting. And that's what we are projecting him for tonight. We have Mobley at 42 fantasy points in 35 minutes against this Pacers team. And again, the Pacers play at a nice fast pace. So it's a nice spot for Cleveland. Yeah, Mobley, 5.7x is our value score on Mobley. He looks really strong. Looks like one of those better center plays on the slate. And the nice thing is you can play him at power forward as well. So a lot more eligibility than the center only guys. Mobley is going to be in a lot of my lineups for sure.
All right, let's anything else from this game, or shall we talk a little bet 365?
Yeah, I mean, Karis LeVert looks like a great value. So we got to note that
I hate that guy.
Darius Garland is out
all the time.
I mean, Karis, he's a good fantasy producer. Yes, he's a little bit volatile, but the past 2 games he's put up 27.75 fantasy points in each of those games. Now the price has come up to 5,100, but he's also played 31 minutes in each of the past 2 games. We are projecting him for 33 minutes here. We have Darius Garland out along with Jarrett Allen, Ricky Rubio. Just another great spot for Karis LeVert against the Pacers. Is this a revenge spot? Was he on the Pacers at one point? Am I misremembering?
LeVert, yes.
Pacers, yeah, so it's,
and Brooklyn.
Yeah. Okay. So nice spot for LeVert. This is my first NBA show of the season. So a lot of the stuff that I know later on, I'm like, wait, this feels like he was, but I'm not 100%. Yeah. He's 5,100.
They say the memory's the first thing to go, Neil.
Oh no, come on, EMac. You got 11 years on me, EMac. You're still so sharp. I'm gonna be
11 years to
sharp for
catch
another
up
20
to you.
years.
I know, it's crazy how
that's right. So yeah, I mean, we got to touch on LeVert just because he is projected for 33 minutes, 31 fantasy points at 5,100. That is a really strong value. Max Strus, 5,300. We're projecting for 30 2/3 fantasy points. That's a really strong value score. Isaac Okoro, I mean, if you want to just take the stance that you're never playing Isaac Okoro, go ahead. But 4,100, we have him projected for nearly 25 fantasy points in 32 and a half minutes. So he actually looks like a great value play. Dean Wade is only 3,000, projects for just under 18 fantasy points. So, and then even Niang is projected for 17 fantasy points at 3,300. So it's kind of a great spot for value for Cleveland. Obviously, Mitchell is going to be the first guy you go to if he plays. Mobley looks like a fantastic value, but then Levert also a really solid value. Strus, Okoro, Wade, Niang all look pretty good as well.
Thank God we don't have to talk about Shetty Osman on this team.
That's true. That
feels
helps.
like he just got an inordinate amount of time over the last few years.
Yeah,
and he would have again tonight if he was still on the squad. Let's see here. Bet365. Key things. If you guys are in one of the special enlightened states that has Bet365. So it's not everywhere, but it's in New Jersey, Colorado, Ohio, Virginia, Iowa, and Kentucky just came online. If you sign up through the link below us here in the YouTube description, you have the opportunity to choose 2 different deals. You can only choose one of them, but you can choose the bet $5, get $150 immediately in Bet365 credit, which you have 1 week to use. Or I'm gonna drop the landing page here into the YouTube chat because you'll want to look at it and make sure it makes it that you get it. It makes sense. But what they have is their basically it's not a risk-free. They call it their safety net bet. And what that is your first wager up to $1,000 if you so choose. If you happen to lose, you will get bet credit back for that. Again, you're going to have a week to lose or a week to use it here, or it goes away. So key things you want to think about when making that type of decision is, if you got a lot of disposable income and you want to shoot for the stars, that risk-free bet, that large one is probably the way to go. If you're a little savvier and you want to be a little more thrifty, then betting 5 to get 150 is probably appropriate. I actually, the only reason I would go with the other one is these opportunities don't come along all that often. The accountant in me, once upon a time I was a CPA, the accountant in me says the bet 5 gets 150 is the better way to do it, because if you lose that wager, you're now chasing your $1,000, even though you get second chances, but you only got 1 week to use it. And sometimes you can feel forced into some wagers. So betting 5, getting 150 feels a little bit better, but that's at Bet365. And that's a good way to think about the other sports books that have these sign-up offers as well. All righty, Neil, let's move on to our next game, which would be Philadelphia 76ers in Toronto taking on the Raptors. Obviously, Harden is out. Nobi will play. This is back-to-back front end for Philadelphia. They'll be in Philadelphia tomorrow hosting the Portland Trailblazers, but tonight they are in Toronto. It's a back-to-back for them. It's a 3-4. They lost in Chicago 104-103 in overtime. Pascal Siakam got 41 minutes. Scotty Barnes 39. Dennis Schroeder, who's the new point guard there, replacing Fred VanVleet. He had 35 minutes, and then Gary Trent, the super sub, had 36 minutes. Again, I mentioned Anobi left the game with some cramping. He's expected to play tonight. So it looks like they'll have their usual complement of players here. How are you feeling about Joel Embiid tonight? Reigning MVP, no James Harden. I made the joke on the show this morning. The last 6 times he's played Philadelphia, he's only had more than 50 fantasy points twice. But he's averaged like 48 fantasy points in those 6 games. So, but picking an arbitrary number there, that has me looking at some of the other centers a little more closely than Embiid. But how are we to besmirch the good name of the reigning MVP who can drop 50 fantasy points on anybody? There's just a lot of good centers tonight. How do you want to roll with the 76ers?
Chat pointed out that apparently OG Anunoby is currently doubtful. So
did that
we
change?
got an update.
I'm sorry, chat.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
may have changed. I might have missed it too. I've been
yep, 6 minutes ago, OG Anunoby now listed as doubtful, though the coach said just shortly prior to this that he was going to try to play. So thank you for pointing that out. I missed that one coming through.
Yeah, that is.
This reminds me of Major League. Well, cross him off. You remember that movie? This guy's dead. Cross him off. OG Anunoby not dead, but sounds like he's trending towards watching this one and not playing in it.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to to get OG out of our projections, and that's I'm going to have to rely on the projections team for this one. So I'm going to wait to do my analysis of Toronto until we actually get OG out of. Oh, he's already out. Never mind. We are ready. We have OG. They were ready to go with taking OG out of the projections, so that is helpful. Appreciate the projections team as always. So I'll start with Toronto because they are the team affected. Still, nobody on Toronto becomes like a smash value here. Like increases everybody else a little bit. Looks like maybe I will wait just in case we updated that part without updating everybody else yet. But as of right now, it doesn't look like any incredible value. So I'm gonna save the Toronto analysis just to make sure that I'm not missing something in a point per dollar, because I'm just relying on the projections team for this one. Embiid, I'll start there. Looks good. He is our highest projected center on the slate, projected for about 56.5 fantasy points at 10,700 price tag. That's a 5.3x value. Coming in about 15% ownership. I've got him in about 15% of my lineups. I don't really think I'm taking any kind of major stand here on Embiid. Seems like a nice enough spot against Jakob Poeltl. But I'm not taking a massive stand there. There are just so many centers that I like on the slate. I think that's the big thing for me. That's going to make it hard for me to like take a huge overweight stance on Embiid, but he looks like a pretty strong option at center. Just he is, as I said, the highest projected center on the entire slate. He's also the most expensive center on the entire slate. So you're paying the price for him, but it's probably worth it to pay 56.5 fantasy points. Outside of Embiid, we don't have anybody projected for 5x or better on the Sixers. We have Maxey looks okay. He's 8,200 projected for 39 fantasy points. That's a 4.8x value. Totally fine. Not like a great play. Tobias Harris, fine. 6,600, about 32 fantasy points. That's okay. That's playable. It's not somebody that I'm going to be jamming into lineups. And then from there, we got, I guess you could play Oubre if you want to. We're projecting him for 24.5 fantasy points in 28 minutes at 5,700. That's okay. DeAnthony Melton's 5,600. We're projecting him for 24.6 fantasy points in 29 minutes. That's okay. Nobody else that I really want to play on Philadelphia. I currently the only Philadelphia player. I'm playing 21 lineups tonight. The only player in any of my lineups right now is Joel Embiid, is in 14% of them. So that I'm not really playing the Sixers tonight. And then Toronto, let me refresh just to make sure that I've that this is all updated. But it doesn't look like anybody
update again. It sounds like Mitchell. I haven't seen it officially, but Chad is saying he's out. I'm looking for confirmation. Neil, we're in the full swing of it. 18 minutes and the projections are all over the place. It's awesome.
Yeah, OG Anunoby ruled out. Now you say Donovan Mitchell is expected to be out?
Looking to confirm it here.
I haven't seen that update yet, but
for me,
that's obviously really impactful if we get Donovan Mitchell out. So News God has confirmed that OG is out.
Here's one from Pacers JJ, who looks like he's a sideline reporter pre and post game for the Pacers. He says the injury report has Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jared Allen, and Ty Jerome all out.
That is big.
So let's see. We need absolute confirmation, and it's 45 minutes before their tip off.
That game lock, yeah.
So we should have that in the next 10 minutes. But you're right. I'm not seeing it on official sources yet, chat, but I would like to sort of trust the guy who's the sideline announcer. But he only has 16,000 followers. Not that we fault that, but it's not like he is hardcore. But I'm hoping he's standing there. So we got a lot of dust that we're waiting for it to settle. Do you want to move to a different game and circle back on this rather than guess?
Yeah, let's circle back to Toronto. As of right now, we still don't have any great values on Toronto, but I did not check whether these projections changed with the news. So I'm not 100% sure if these are updated. I know that we have OG out of the projections now. I don't want to make any guesses about whether we have updated for everybody else. I would guess that we have, but I'm not sure who's doing the projections tonight, so I don't know who to even reach out to. So I'm going to wait a minute, give it a chance to update for Toronto. But as of right now, we don't have any great values. Let's check in again in 5 minutes.
That sounds like a fair idea because we do have 2 minutes to go. Charles, another question here says, sorry for all the questions. Never be sorry. Never be sorry. He says for a GPP, Scotty Barnes or Bam, they're at the same price.
Scotty Barnes or Bam. All right, let me look. I'm guessing it's going to be Scotty Barnes for me. So yes.
I think
Oh, is
it's
this on?
Scotty Barnes. He did play a ton of minutes last night. Bam, I think played 35. Barnes, I think was at 39. I'd still lean towards Barnes, but
Yeah, so we actually
it's
have Barnes. Barnes is cheaper on DraftKings. Is he talking about FanDuel?
FanDuel. My apologies, FanDuel tournament.
Okay.
They're the same price.
All right, at the same price on DraftKings, it would be Scotty Barnes for me. But let me look at what we have.
This just in from our CEO, Thomas Kennedy. That's Tom JK123 over there in the DFS world. He says he's on projections.
Oh.
We're good.
Neil
Oh,
we're
Eric,
good. Okay.
Go sell something. We're on it.
All right. Thank you, Tom, for the update. So we can do our Toronto analysis. To answer your question, I think it's Scotty for me. I think that he actually projects better than Bam does. I don't think that it's a massive difference there, but I think that I have a slight preference for Scotty Barnes there. And let me just check. Yeah, I mean by a quarter of it.
Would we be concerned about the Twin Towers in Minnesota? No, that isn't really a driving force. Regular season defense is nothing like what we got to watch through 6 weeks of playoffs, including the finals. This is not quite all-star level defense, as in Ole. Nobody's taking shots from the logo, but it's not exactly good defense at this point. Close games, closing minutes, overtime, yes. The rest of the game, not so much.
Yep. So yeah, I think we both answer Scotty for that one. It's really close. It's they're projected within a quarter of a fantasy point of each other, so not any like huge stand there, but feels like he has higher upside. With OG out, maybe Scotty gets a little bit of a bounce there. Yeah, as far as Toronto goes, so now we know that it is fully updated. As I said, no screaming values from Toronto. We've got some decent value here that we have. Gary Trent is the highest value score on the slate. He's projected for around just under 27.5 fantasy points at 5,100, projected for just about 6% ownership. So Gary Trent looks okay, but like doesn't stand out as like a phenomenal, like we didn't get a smash spot here with OG out. We've also got at 5.4x Jalen McDaniels, not to be confused with his superior brother Jaden, who is out tonight. Jalen McDaniels at 4,100, projected for 22 fantasy points. Looks like a pretty decent value. You can go there. And this is a revenge spot for Jalen McDaniels. He was on Philadelphia last year. So you could go to Jalen if you wanted to. And then from there, Pascal Siakam actually doesn't look like a great value. Certainly you can play Pascal Siakam, though, at sub 1% ownership. He's just a guy who can spike an upside, but we're only projecting him for 41 2/3 fantasy points at 9,600. Playable, but not like I'm not going to be playing. I currently don't have anybody from Toronto. I'm not sure that I will. If I were going to play somebody from Toronto, it would probably be Scotty Barnes, maybe Jalen McDaniels, maybe Gary Trent. I guess you could go to Pirtle if you wanted to. He projects for 28 fantasy points at 5,600, so he's playable. Dennis Schroeder's playable at 5,500, but nobody who's standing out to me is like a great play on Toronto. Do you see it any differently, EMac?
No, I'm kind of coming in the same way. I haven't rerun let me rephrase this. Prior to the Anobi thing, I ran 100 lineups on DK and 100 lineups on FanDuel. Essentially, you're, as Chad is kind of saying, you're getting three Cavs. That's going to be for sure once we get the Mitchell stuff into the projections, and then you're getting 3 Memphis players, and then the rest is just kind of smattering through. There's a few Wizards on DK, on FanDuel. There was you get a little bit of Kevin Durant. It looks like. So we've got a couple more games here, Neil. So let's hit on those. And then as we get cemented information, we will do what we can with them. So the Heat and Timberwolves, you are a Timberwolves fan. Anthony Edwards is pretty good. Tied his career high with 14 rebounds in the last game. Also, I want to say had 25 or 27 field goal attempts. It was his 5th highest of his career. Last year, he averaged 20 and a half. I mentioned on this morning show, it's not going to be this year, it won't be next year, but when he's in 27-ish range, his peak of his powers, I think he's going to be challenging for a scoring title. This is his team now. I mean, I love Karl Anthony Towns, but Anthony Edwards can take it to that next level here. Start us off with the Timberwolves, and I'm going to see if we get the projections update, and then we'll hit Miami next, even though they are the visitors.
Yeah, so the Timberwolves are not a great spot for projection, like fantasy point per dollar type plays. Like nobody really stands out as a fantastic play. Our best point per dollar play on the Wolves is Naz Reid. He's 4,400. We're projecting for just over 24 fantasy points. That's a 5.5x value. He looks fine. Other than Naz Reid, you're basically paying up to be contrarian with the Timberwolves. And that's kind of where they were a lot last year as well. We had a lot of spots where it was like nobody's really playing them. They're getting really low owned because of the price tags, but it's never that shocking to see one of these guys go off. Jimmy Butler being out certainly helps the Wolves here. Anthony Edwards, yeah, I like him as a contrarian play at 2.4% ownership. I am a huge Timberwolves homer, so if you want to factor that in, you can, but it doesn't project that great. So that's probably the better analysis is projects for around 43 fantasy points at 9,300. That's not somebody you really want to be having in a ton of your lineups, but I also think at 9,300, like he could put up 60 fantasy points. It's not a 13 game slate, so that would do if he did put up 60 fantasy points. It's within his range of outcomes. So I'm going to get to a little bit of Anthony Edwards. I'm going to be above that 2.4% that the field's at, but he's not like a smash play here. Similarly, Karl Anthony Towns, 8,400, like the price tag. He's a 5x value projected for just over 42 fantasy points. He looks pretty good. Nickeil Alexander-Walker started the last game, but didn't really play that much, didn't really do that much, played 23 minutes in that game, put up 11.5 fantasy points. Kind of a disappointing game for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Who knows? Maybe if he was playing better, he would have played more, but that game was competitive throughout. He wasn't in foul trouble. He just didn't really get the minutes. So he would have to play into more minutes to get there. Kyle Anderson looks like a decent value. He's 5,400 coming off the bench, played more minutes than Nickeil Alexander-Walker last game, played 30 minutes off the bench against Toronto in a competitive game. So I think Kyle Anderson is playable at 5,400. Rudy Gobert, I would be more interested if he wasn't only center eligible. It's kind of tough to get there just because he's only center eligible. Mike Conley, just not a great point per dollar play. You could, like, Conley is playable, I would say, at 5,500, projects for 24.5 fantasy points, but not like a smash play. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to Shake Milton. So I think that kind of covers it. You're kind of, I like Ant as just a contrarian play. So in otherwise chalky lineups, you can throw Ant in there as your contrarian pay up option. Cat kind of works. Kyle Anderson kind of works. I don't really think I'm going to go Gobert. Naz Reid actually works as like a somewhat of a value play, but 12% ownership is, probably more than it needs to be for Naz.
All right. So the interesting thing, I just reran the projections. Now I'm getting a lot of Joel Embiid because things have maneuvered around. In our projections have taken Mitchell out. Again, that isn't an officially confirmed report, but it seems most likely that's going to happen. Now think about this. We said you're probably not going to get it before lock. This is right around the time it's going to pop in or out. We're not going to be stuck getting like the running back for college football today that was reported not to be out there in warmups about 20 minutes before lock and then didn't play. And he was on like 40% of everybody's lineups. That's not going to happen because we still have 30 minutes before Mitchell's game goes off. That whole game is where the value is going to appear. There's already decent value in that particular game. That's either going to be better without Mitchell, or you can put Mitchell back in your lineups. Again, we're down to how are you handling these 3 games going off at 7? And then what are you going to do with the other 4? So don't panic on this. This is night 5 of at the NBA. We've got another 160 regular season days ahead of us here.
Yeah,
that this is going to be our default, and God forbid that we get into the crazy. Sorry, Neil.
I do just want to say, like, because it is kind of it'll impact how you do your lineups prior to lock. Also, we do have that. Tom did update that for us, so I do just want to give a quick update on Cleveland because it is going to impact how people build. So now a lot of Cleveland players really stand out as great values. Karis LeVert looks even better. We're projecting Karis LeVert now for 41.5 fantasy points at 5,100. Looks like an absolute smash play now. He might be making into all of my lineups tonight. Again, I'm only playing 21, but Karis LeVert looks like the best value play on the slate now. We have Isaac Okoro is less of a smash just because he is Isaac Okoro, but will be still in a lot of my lineups. We're projecting for 28.5 fantasy points at 4,100. I feel better about LeVert than Okoro. Certainly both these guys have bit me in the past, but LeVert feels a little bit safer. I do think that he is a very strong fantasy option, and Okoro's coming in at just 20% ownership, so that is pretty reasonable. Dean Wade now projected for 22.5 fantasy points at the min price. Looks like one of our better fantasy point per dollar plays on the slate. Max Strus now projected for 34.5 fantasy points at 5,300. Evan Mobley now projected for 47 fantasy points at 7,300. So these are like, this is, if you sort by value right now, our top 5 value plays on the slate point per dollar are Karis LeVert, Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, Max Drew. So mega impactful having Donovan Mitchell probably out of this game. So it is worth mentioning.
Yeah, and I was more that we can still recover from
Yeah, absolutely.
the most part. You're not going to be carrying a 0, which is just the end of the night for you in basketball. From that standpoint. All right, quick like a bunny. One more game to go here. Utah Jazz at Phoenix, back-to-back and 3-4 for the Jazz. They beat the Lakers or the Clippers 120, 118 last night. Markkanen played 35 minutes, Clarkson 34. John Collins played 34. I think we're light on Collins's projections. I think a lot of places are. He is now has the chance to do a little bit more scoring and a little bit more rebounding. I like him for a double-double tonight. I wrote him up in the DFS Building Blocks article as a wager. I got him at 400 to 1. So 4x over there on BetMGM this afternoon. So I like that one. On the Phoenix side, no Beal, no Booker. That means Jordan Goodwin is going to have, even if he's not in the starting lineup, he's going to have elevated duties. Josh Okogie isn't going to keep just dropping every shot, but he's going to have some additional opportunities. And then you got Kevin Durant, 35, 13-time All-Star. He's going to be chucking the rock. What do you want to do from this game? Because unless you make adjustments, you're only getting Durant on DK when you run your crunches.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance now because we have so much value opening up in Cleveland. I can actually look at what I am getting. I just had to get my final crunch in there before lock
right now myself,
with all of Cleveland guys in there. But now I got it in. So let me take a look at it. So currently I am getting to a good amount of Durant. I do have a couple Jordan Goodwin lineups. He is only 4,400, projects for 26 fantasy points. So Goodwin does still stand out as a decent value. Not the smash spot that he was earlier when we didn't have all that Cleveland value, but he's certainly in play at 5.9x value. Nurkic is one of those guys that I'm like, you can always play Nurkic. Like he's 6,300. The price is totally fine there. He's played 28 minutes each of the past 2 games. We have Nurk projected for just under 28 minutes. Once again, 34 fantasy point projection. I might give him a boost just to get a little bit. The problem is I'm still probably not going to get a ton of Nurk just because he's only center eligible. I've mentioned several other centers that I have interest in playing tonight, so not a great spot there. Durant is currently in 62% of my lineups. I might run another crunch. Maybe I'll get to less, but like he looks great. He projects for 53.5 fantasy points at 9,700. Really strong point per dollar play and you can pay up now because we have so many value options. So Durant does look strong. Eric Gordon looks okay, 24.5 fantasy point projection at 4,800. That works. Okogie looks pretty good, 24.5 fantasy point projection at 5,000. That works. You could go to Eubanks if you wanted to. I'm probably not getting there now that we have all this other value, but he's 3,700, projects for 18 fantasy points. Probably not getting there again and he's only center eligible. So scratch that. I'm not playing any Drew Eubanks with only center eligibility and only projected for 18 fantasy points.
All right, we got 2 minutes. I'm uploading my lineups. I'm ending up with 2/3 LeVert, 2/3 Durant, 2/3 Strus, 2/3 Tillman. Guess where I set my cap at?
Right.
And then I had to force in a couple of Utah guys. I really like John Collins tonight. Again, I think he is going to find the pastures much greener in Utah.
All right. You're talking me into some John Collins. So currently I have 0 players from Utah. So that is my current analysis of Utah. But John Collins was already projected for 5.4x, and you think that he is under projected. So maybe I'll force in a little bit of 5K John Collins, who has power forward eligibility. So that's pretty nice. I will add THT projected for Talon Horton Tucker, projected for just under 27 fantasy points at 5,000. That's in play. Jordan Clarkson is in play, projected for just over 30 fantasy points at 6,100. These guys, and Markkanen is one of those guys, like you can always play Markkanen as a pay up to be contrarian spot. He's 8,900, projected for 1% ownership. Markkanen's a guy who can just get hot. Similarly, actually, Walker Kessler only projected for 25 fantasy points. I guess
he's only played 20 minutes each.
Yeah, what is going on there?
30 seconds from lock. I think Collins is eating into it just a little bit. I didn't go in and really dig into the rotations. I don't think Collins has supplanted him by any chance, but it does seem like that the trend could reverse itself tonight. We don't know. We're trying to base this off 2 games, but it does seem like Kessler's mostly defense. And he really didn't, I mean, he was getting those blocks, but until he was getting to 26, 28 minutes, he wasn't really dominating on his fantasy production. Remember, as in his only year. But that maybe he's starting slowly, maybe something has changed, etc. We did just get the official Cleveland lineup. It's LeVert, Strus, Okoro, Wade, and Mobley. We are basically at lock. I didn't have a chance to mention the lineup generator, but I'm going to. Why? Well, because we are giving a promo code here. That is the promo code is tip off, all one word, but that will get you 20% off any stochastic NBA DFS package. But the lineup generator is an easy and cheap way to slide on in to the good stuff. I have an article on the homepage here where I wrote up about the NFL lineup generator, but the beauty of our lineup generators is it uses all of our tools: the boom bust, the leverage, the player projections, the popularity projections, synergy within the games, how you can gain leverage on the field. It's built off of the simulations as well. It's building you plus EV lineups. This is Tom, when he was explaining this to us, said this is what he thinks. This is the David versus Goliath. He said this is the bigger changer as opposed to the Sims, because this, if it elevates all the ham and eggers like me up there to be positive, or you go from break even to positive ROI. You go from depositing a fair amount to kind of breaking even and having a fun entertainment expense rather than an angry DFS experience. That's going to make it harder for the people at the top to win. This is going to be the thing that topples slowly the different advantages here. But Neil talks about it a lot on some of his shows that he does to cover this during the week. So you can see how it works on the YouTube channel. I'm covering it now for the NFL article as well, both for DraftKings and FanDuel. You can do a variety of settings for this. You can do chalky builds, contrarian builds, balanced builds. You can lock in a specific player or two, depending on which sport it is. For our NFL Showdown package, you get this, and you can choose the game script, right? You can say, here's where the baseline is. Does one team score 6%, basically a touchdown more than expected? Do they both go lower, or does it go vice versa, right? You can pick those games that will then give you access to different scenarios and simulations. And that is what we like to look at here to find those positive expected value lineups, which just means you have a better chance of realizing a win. It's on an infinite time horizon, so you want to be careful. Those gigantic ROIs, you got to play like 1,000 lifetimes to get some of those. The realistic ones, it's getting rid of all the crappy lineups, the air quote dead lineups, the paying the rake lineups. That's the key. And when you're getting in for $15 a week to do that, that's like $2 a day. Even if you're playing $10 or $15 a day, totally worth it if you're not lighting $2 on fire in your own lineups. So that's
with NBA in particular.
That's how strong I feel about the lineup generator. It's
where there's no like real correlations in NBA, or like it's not as obvious. Like just having something that will tell you like balance your lineups out for you. It'll balance the chalk and the contrarian option. So I think it's a fantastic option for NBA. Of course, you do need to run it like as close to lock as possible. That is extremely important. But yeah, really, really powerful tool.
All righty. Well, Neil, with that, we are going to get on out of here. Neil's hosting a Halloween party. I'm going to go watch my Washington Huskies here on FS1. I don't have to borrow my brother's login to get to Pac-12 network. RIP Pac-12. But shout out to the Pac-2. That's a fun talk about David and Goliath story. But we're going to slide on out of here. You get all the NFL you need. I believe at 8:45 tomorrow morning, you're going to get Josh Engelman kicking off a 4-hour and change block up through kickoff. And then you're also going to get the NFL Live Before Lock for Sunday night football. That will be myself and Neil on that show. It's going to be a good one. We should have some fun here, but follow Neil on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I am at EMac DFS, and of course it is stochastic_COM. With that, gamers, hit the like button on the way out, and good luck.